Welcome back to my channel Coins Heritage, one tiny coin. 1 cent minted in 1972, but packed with a century of legacy. In this video, we're diving deep into the history, design, cultural backdrop, and collector value of the 1972 Lincoln cent. Stay tuned, because this humble penny might just be worth more than you think. The United States 1 cent coin has a storied past that stretches back to the very birth of the nation. But it was in 1909, to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, that the penny got its most iconic makeover. That's when the Lincoln cent was born, replacing the Indian head cent. It was the first time a real person, an American president, appeared on regular U.S. coinage. Designed by Victor David Brenner, the coin featured a detailed portrait of Lincoln on the obverse and, originally, 2 wheat stalks on the reverse, earning it the nickname Wheat Penny. But in 1959, to mark 150 years since Lincoln's birth, the reverse was changed again, this time to the Lincoln Memorial, a design by Frank Gasparo. And that brings us to the 1972 version. The 1972 Lincoln cent is a continuation of the Lincoln Memorial design that ran from 1959 to 2008. Let's break it down. The front, or obverse, features a right-facing portrait of President Abraham Lincoln. Above him, the words, "In God We Trust." To the left of Lincoln's profile is the word Liberty, and to the right, the date, 1972. Just below the date, you might see a small mint mark, either nothing for Philadelphia, a D for Denver, or an S for San Francisco. Now flip the coin. The reverse shows a detailed engraving of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. At the top, it reads United States of America. Below that, in smaller letters, E pluribus unum. And at the bottom, the denomination, 1 cent. It may look small and simple, but the level of detail, especially on the Lincoln Memorial, is astounding. If you look closely under magnification, you can actually see the statue of Lincoln seated inside. To really appreciate the 1972 penny, you need to understand the time in which it was made. The early 1970s were a defining era in American history. Politically and socially, America was navigating the aftermath of the Vietnam War. Protest movements, civil rights activism, and public mistrust in government were rising sharply. In the White House, President Richard Nixon was in power, just 2 years away from the infamous Watergate scandal. Culturally, the 70s were vibrant. This was the age of disco, funk, and the early stages of punk rock. Music icons like David Bowie, Aretha Franklin, and the Rolling Stones dominated airwaves. The American auto industry was still thriving, although the oil crisis loomed. Ford Mustangs and Chevy Novas roared through the streets. And economically, inflation was creeping up, and the U.S. had just gone off the gold standard in 1971. By 1972, the value of the dollar was floating freely for the first time in modern history. Even the cost of making a penny, primarily out of 95% copper and 5% zinc, was becoming a factor in future redesigns. So, when you hold a 1972 penny, you're holding a piece of an America at a cultural, economic, and political turning point. The 1972 Lincoln cent was struck at 3 major U.S. mints. In Philadelphia, which used no mint mark, over 2.9 billion coins were produced. Denver, with the D mint mark, struck over 2.6 billion. And San Francisco, marked with an S, minted around 380 million coins, mostly for proof and collector sets. But here's where it gets interesting. 1972 is famous for having a double die obverse variety. This error happened when the die used to strike the coin shifted slightly between impressions from the hub, creating a noticeable doubling on the date, the word Liberty, and the phrase In God We Trust. How can you tell? Use a magnifier and look closely. On the famous double die, the doubling is very obvious. The 2 in 1972 might appear shadowed or layered, and the letters in Liberty and In God We Trust will look like they've been stamped twice. The 1972 DDO, cataloged as FS 101, is one of the most collectible Lincoln cent errors, often fetching hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on the condition. There are also several minor varieties and lesser-known double dies, but FS 101 is the big prize. What's a 1972 penny worth today? Let's break it down by type and condition. If you have a regular circulation penny, either from Philadelphia or Denver, and it's been in people's pockets for decades, it's typically worth 1 to 3 cents. A little more than face value. However, if your coin is in uncirculated condition, meaning it still looks new, it could be worth $5 to $15. And in especially high-grade condition, like MS-67 and above, values can go up to $50 or even $150. The 1972 S-proof pennies, which were struck for collectors with a shiny mirror finish, can range in value from $2 to $10, depending on quality and cameo effect. Now, let's talk about the star of the show, the 1972 double die obverse. Circulated examples of the DDO can fetch $100 to $300. In uncirculated condition, the value can soar past $500. And the top-graded examples, those in mint state red condition, graded MS-66 or higher, have sold at auction for over $3,000. So, if you've got a jar of old pennies lying around, you might want to take a second look. That plain-looking 1972 cent could turn out to be a hidden treasure. Of course, not every old penny is valuable. Most are still just 1 cent. But what makes the difference is condition, rarity, and whether there's an error variety. The 1972 Lincoln cent is more than just a coin. It's a snapshot of a transformative decade in American history. For collectors, it offers a chance to hunt for valuable errors, a connection to vintage copper coinage, and a tangible piece of 20th century Americana. That it's a great starter piece for beginner numismatists and a must-have for Lincoln series enthusiasts. And best of all, it's still out there in circulation. You might just find one in your pocket change today. So, the next time you spot a penny from 1972, don't just toss it aside. Look closer, because this little copper coin might hold a big story, or even a big payday. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more coin stories, values, and collecting tips. Thanks for watching, and happy collecting.